So then, Fly Me to the Moon. It's a doggone stone cold classic and you need to know it. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the chords. I'm also going to do a bit of a deep dive and a bit of harmonic analysis, and I'm going to show you and teach you the arrangement that I've just played. This is one that you can play at gigs, you can play it at jams, it doesn't matter where you play it, people love it, so you need it in your repertoire. It's also a nice straightforward one, it's not too difficult, and a lot of the ideas in here, a lot of the chord progressions, a lot of the cadences just occur in lots and lots of jazz standards. So by taking a look at this, you're going to be unlocking a lot of understanding that's going to help you interpret lots of other jazz standards as well. So let's get into it. So the first thing to say about Fly Me to the Moon is that the melody, for the most part, is based around the third of each chord. So if we start on A minor 7, which is the opening chord, the melody actually starts on the third of that chord, which is a C. This is actually a fairly good way for trying to figure out the melody of any song. Start with the third. Very often the melody will be starting on the third of the chord. So we start on A minor 7 and we're going to put our pinky, you can see I'm doing a rock and roll version, a death metal version of Fly Me to the Moon here. I'm putting my fingers aside so you can see what I'm doing. We're going to put our pinky on the third of that chord, which is the C. So we're going to just bar the 5th fret, play it from the 5th string, barring strings 1, 2, 3 and 4. That gives us an A minor 7. And then we're going to move up to the 8th fret and walk down. Okay? Fly me to. And then on the 2nd string at the 8th fret, and then we're going to play a D minor 7. Moon. But we're not going to play the 1st string because we want that melody note, which is the 3rd of the chord, which is F, which is on our 2nd string. So effectively the opening melody goes, which is walking, descending from the top of the C major scale back down. If we take the C major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, do, do, fly me to the moon. So we've got C, B, A, G, F, descending down the C major scale, and that takes us from the 3rd of the 1st chord to the 3rd of the 2nd chord. So we've got an A minor 7. And then we go back up. But we skip the 7th of the C major scale. Okay? I should say, by the way, we're in the key of C major here, okay? So we've got A minor 7, D minor 7, and then we've got a G7, and that top string, the 1st string, will give us the melody note, which is the 3rd of the G7 chord. So you can see what I'm saying about it, kind of the melody being based around the 3rd of each chord. So at that point, you just want to play that chord, take your finger off the root, and just play the 5th fret of the 1st string. Layer, and then we're descending again on the C major scale. Mung. So we've got a G there on the 2nd string, the F, which is also on the 2nd string, and that leads us down to the 3rd of the next chord, which is a C major 7, stars. Okay, so this is a really great example of voice leading. Okay, Fly Me to the Moon is a really it's a classic to learn because it really teaches you a lot about voice leading, about melody, and about harmony and how chords and melody kind of interact with each other. Fly me to the moon, I want to lay among the stars. You'll also probably have noticed that what we've got here is a 6-2-5-1. We're in C major, so we've got an A minor 7 to a D minor 7, so that's 6-2. So the 5 chord, the dominant, which is our G7, to our C major 7. So that takes us into the second part of the A section, and what happens next is quite a common move in jazz, and it's why I think that Fly Me to the Moon is a really, really good tune to learn as maybe one of your first jazz standards. Very similar thing occurs in Autumn Leaves. What happens is that we move into a minor key. So we move from the major, in this case C major, to the relative minor, which in this case is A minor. So let's take a look at that. So the first chord in the second part of the A section is an F major 7. Okay, and I'm playing this down here with the root on the 3rd fret. This is an inversion, okay? And the reason I'm playing it here is because it gives me this A note, which is let me see what, okay? So effectively we're moving down the scale again, we're descending down the scale. At the moment we're now in the A minor scale, the relative minor, the natural minor. Okay, so then what we've got is we've got a B minor 7 flat 5. Spring is open first string, first fret, like, slide up to the 5th fret on. So we've got let me see what spring is like on. Okay, so F major 7 to B minor 7 flat 5. And then we've got an E7, Jupiter and Mars. So what I like to do with that E7 is I like to play it as an E7 sharp 9. So I've got the E7, but I'm putting my pinky on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Jupiter, and then I'm taking it off, but I'm putting my pinky, oh sorry, this finger, not my pinky, this finger, on the 1st fret of the 1st string. So it goes Jupiter, open string, 3rd fret of the 2nd string, and Mars, and I'll play an A minor triad at that point. A couple of things to say about this. The first thing that you probably notice is that if we were to take the natural A minor scale and basically play the C scale starting on A, if we were to harmonise that, we have a flat 7. So we don't have this E7 chord in there, rather we have an E minor 7 chord, okay? E minor 7 chord is not as useful because it doesn't create tension, it's not a dominant chord. So what we've got here in this E7 chord effectively is a secondary dominant, so we're borrowing a chord in order to dominate the A minor so that we get that sense of resolution, okay? So that it feels like it wants to resolve back to the A minor. So what we've really got going on here is a 6-2-5-1 in the key of A minor, but we're using a secondary dominant here in order to get back to our A minor, to our new key center, okay? The reason that I then go to an A minor triad, so I go 6-2-5-1, and I go to a triad just because I want my melody notes on the 2nd string, okay? And then what I do is I play a A7. So I've got another secondary dominant here. You could also play this as an A7 sharp 5 up here if you wanted, okay? Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. You can embellish that, okay, if you wanted to. This A7 is important because it's a secondary dominant, it creates a little bit of tension, it wants to resolve, and where does it resolve back to? It resolves back to this chord here, which is a D minor 7. So now at this point we're back in the key of C major. If you were watching at the very beginning, you'll notice that I did some other stuff though over that 6-2-5-1 in A minor. I went and I just did a little bit of a single note run in order to get back to the D minor 7. So I can show you that as well if you want to do that and make it a bit fancier. So what I do is on the E7, E7 sharp 9 to an E7 flat 9, slide up to the 5th fret of the 1st string, then to the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and then the 5th fret of the 2nd string, walk it down to the 3rd fret, and then the 5th fret of the 3rd string to the 4th fret of the 1st string, to the 5th fret of the 4th string, to the 6th fret of the 4th string, and that takes us within a semitone of the 5th of the D minor 7 chord, so it wants to resolve at that point. So just a bit of voice leading, it just kind of pulls us into the D minor 7 chord. So that's a nice little embellishment that you can use. So at that point, we end up back where we pretty much started in the key of C major. So we've got a 2, a 5, and a 1. So what I'm doing here is I'm playing a D minor 7, but I'm putting my pinky on the 8th fret of the 1st string, so I'm actually playing that 7th note of the chord on the 1st string, and that just gives me the melody note. Hit that 3rd of the chord first as well, because that gives you other. In other words, And then on the bottom string, 6th string, I'm going from fret 5 to fret 3, just walking down, little walking bass line, to a G7, sharp 5. And then on the 1st string, I'm going hold my 5 to 3, hand to the C major 7 again. In other words, hold my hand. Then I'm going to raise the root of the C major 7 by 1 semitone, and that's going to give me a D flat minor 7 flat 5, okay? In other words, hold my hand. And then we repeat that 2-5-1. In other words, darling, kiss me. And I've just got a little turnaround. B minor 7, flat 5 to an A sharp 9 to an E7. That just takes us back because we've got that E7 again acting as a secondary dominant, wanting to take us back to the A minor 7 chord. Okay, so that takes us into the second verse essentially. So the good news is that the second verse is very similar to the first verse. We play a lot of the same stuff. Fill my heart with song and let me dance forevermore. You're the one I long for, the one I worship and adore. Okay? And then it goes back into the C major, 2-5-1. In other words, okay, so we've got the 2 and the 5, but this time, instead of going down here, we go up here. So at the end of that second verse, it goes, in other words, please be. So we go up to the 8th fret of the 1st string, and then down to the 7th fret of the 1st string, please be. And then we go to our tonic chord up here, and we play an inversion of the C major 7 up here. Okay? And then we play a D flat half diminished chord, and then we play a full diminished 7th chord, D flat diminished 7th chord, okay? So I'm just going to play that for you so you can hear how it sounds. In other words, please be true. And then what we do is we play a D minor. I think of this as a D minor 9, okay? But it's without the root, okay? So I'm not entirely sure what this chord is called, but I tend to think of it as a D minor 9 inversion minus the root, okay? So we've got our C, which is our 7th, F, which is our 3rd. We've got A as the 5th. And then instead of playing the D, because this would be a D minor inversion of sorts, we're then going up to the 12th fret. And we're adding the 9th on, okay? In other words, please be true. In other. So you want to go in other, and then play the 2nd string, holding that D minor inversion. In other words. So that's the 12th fret of the 1st string, 10th fret of the 2nd string, 13th fret of the 2nd string, 10th fret of the 2nd string. In other words, down for a G7, and then 1st string, 7th fret, I love, 7, 8, 10, and then go back up for the C major 7 inversion. And then to end it, we just go F major 7, G flat diminished 7 to a C major 7. And then I like to just end on a C6-9. Just gives it a sense of resolution, okay? So that whole lot goes, in other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. So there you go, folks. A nice, not too difficult arrangement of Fly Me to the Moon that should get you going. If you've enjoyed this video, if it's been useful, Please like, subscribe, it really, really helps. And until next time, keep making music.